The mysterious night elevator. My name is Rodolfo, and I work as a night caretaker in a residential building in the heart of São Paulo. My routine is usually quiet. I serve intercom, I get occasional deliveries, and take care of the safety of residents while everyone sleeps. However, one ordinary night, something completely unexpected happened, changing my perception of the building forever. That night, I began to hear strange reports from the residents about the elevator. They said the equipment seemed to operate on their own, taking people to floors that were not in the building system. At first, I confess that I thought it was exaggeration or fertile imagination of some owners. After all, macabre stories often come in the quieter hours of the morning. But as night was advanced, the volume of complaints increased, and they became increasingly detailed and frightening. I then decided to investigate on your own. During my rounds, I noticed that the corridors seemed to exhale a strangely heavy atmosphere, as if there was an unwanted presence prowling every corner. Whenever I approached the elevator, I felt goosebumps run down the spine and heard muffled sounds, indecipherable whispers. I examined the control panel and realized that the lights flashed irregularly without any command. The elevator seemed to move alone, indifferent to the buttons pressed. It intrigued and terrified me at the same time. As she continued at night, the reports became increasingly scary. Some residents swore to have seen dark figures inside the elevator. Others claimed that they were taken to non-existent floors, dark and silent places, where the feeling of dread was almost tangible. Not knowing who to turn to, I turned to security cameras in an attempt to find some logical explanation. To my surprise, the recordings showed the elevator opening and closing doors without anyone operating it. It was as if I had a will of my own. No person was coming in or leaving, only the repetitive and disturbing movement of the beating doors. Already quite shaken, I decided that I needed to check everything closely. I entered the elevator on one of its strange night trips and pressed the top floor button from the building. With every meter I climbed, I felt my heart accelerate. The interior seemed to get colder, and a slight vertigo took over me. When finally the doors opened, I came across a corridor wrapped in deep darkness, a floor that I was sure I was not part of the building where I work. I tried to return to the elevator, but the buttons didn't answer. I was stuck in a place that shouldn't even exist. It was then that I heard a low voice, almost a whisper, echoing the dark walls. She pronounced my name and suggested that I accept a journey to something beyond human understanding. I felt my heart almost stop. I refused that supernatural offer, dominated by panic and staggered by the corridors, looking for some way out. After a frantic search, I finally found an emergency door, which gave a ladder back to the royal building. I returned, panting, to my post in the guardhouse. There, I checked the panel again. As if by miracle, the elevator had worked again normally, without any irregularity. It seemed that nothing unusual had happened, but inside me, everything had changed. The experience would haunt me forever. I could never look at that elevator the same way. The mystery remained unanswered and made me understand that certain truths must remain covered. Some puzzles are too dangerous to unravel. The shadow computer. My name is Henry, and I work as a support analyst at a large technology company. On an apparently banal night, I was at home resting from an exhaustive day at work when I received an unexpected call from Mr. Batista, my boss. He sounded upset on the phone, demanding my immediate presence in the office to solve a serious problem in one of the main computers. The urgent tone he used gave me goosebumps. Hardly an incident of IT could not wait until the next day, but something there was very unusual. Upon arriving at the company's building, I noticed that the night was exceptionally cold and silent. I went up to the floor where the technology sector was and saw the space almost all the dark. The few functional lamps projected distorted shadows in the empty corridors. Although I was used to turning a few dawn in the office, that atmosphere was different. An oppressive sensation hovered in the air. I followed the hallway to the isolated room where the main computer was. With each step, a restlessness took over me, as if something observed me from a blind point. I opened the door with a slight tremor in my hands and came across the bluish light of the screen, illuminating the room in contrast to the darkness around. I soon started analyzing the logs of error, seeking an explanation for the urgent call of Mr. Batista. It was then that I noticed something extremely disturbing. There were folders and files that I had never seen before. They seemed full of strange symbols, as if they were some kind of obscure language. As I opened them, I came across sensitive information, illegal transactions, corruption evidence, and suspicious transactions involving the company's high-ranking executives. My stomach rolled as I understood the severity of those documents. The tension was unbearable when I realized I was no longer alone. It was as if an invisible presence hung over me, watching every mouse click, every movement of my eyes. I suddenly turned to the door, hoping to find someone, but all I saw was the darkness of the hallway. Not wanting to give up, I turned my attention to the computer. As I clicked more files, the feeling of invading something forbidden grew. At that time, my phone vibrated. I expected to see a warning message or my boss, but no, it was an unknown number. The message said something terrible. "You went too far. Stop now, before it's late." A chill traveled my spine, and my heart accelerated. I wondered who could have sent me that, how I knew I was there just as I investigated the files. Then I heard sounds in the hallway. Steps dragged, some object scraping on the floor, as if something tried to corner me. I decided to look at the door crack. There was nothing visible, but a poignant sense of evil impregnated the air. I closed the door carefully, trying to find a way out. Fear almost paralyzed me, but I decided that I needed to escape from there and seek help. Finally, in a desperate act, I ran to the office window. I forced the latch, which fortunately gave in, and launched myself on the cold night. The fall was not big, but painful enough to take my breath. With a lot of adrenaline, I got up and ran through the deserted streets aimlessly, just wanting to get as far as possible from that damn room. When I finally stopped on a corner, still panting, I looked up to the imposing building and felt a mix of relief and terror. However, the feeling of having aroused something that should never be disturbed was still present. I had discovered deep, corrupted secrets. That night would become a constant nightmare in my life. Even if I tried to escape, I knew that this evil found on the computer, or what controlled it, may never leave me alone. The voice that whispers in the darkness. My name is Marcos, and work as a night attendant at a small-town emergency center. I spend the dawn monitoring calls, ready to send help to those who need it. One night, however, a unique event changed my destination. The phone rang and, as usual, answered with my standard fulfillment, waiting for someone desperate on the other side of the line. To my horror, what I heard was a whispering voice with an almost inhuman tone. She began to tell me intimate details of my own life, secrets I had kept hidden for years. I felt my throat close as the voice continued, making subtle but full of macabre intentions. I tried in vain to track the call, but it ended abruptly. That later silence was more threatening than any rescue scream I had ever heard. Restless and tormented, I checked the central call records. I discovered, appalled, that there was absolutely nothing about that phone call. It was as if it had never happened. I began to search earlier calls, trying to find some pattern, and soon realized that in recent weeks, a series of indecipherable calls had emerged, always in the middle of the morning, all coming from ghost numbers. With paranoia growing up, I decided to go personally to the places where the calls supposedly originated. I entered dark streets, poorly lit alleys, always hoping to find something to explain where those enigmatic voices came from. But the scenario seemed increasingly sinister. The people I approached knew or pretended to be unaware of completely. Until, in one of my night rounds, I came across an old abandoned store at the end of a deserted street. There was a weak light inside the deteriorated building. Upon entering, feeling a deep shiver, I found a landline on a table in the center of the place. Without hesitation, I dialed the ghost number that appeared in the records. After a few moments of silence, the very cold, whispering voice returned. "I know all your secrets. I know what you did. Now you belong to me." I froze when he heard her repeat revelations about my past, as if torture me with every memory I tried to forget. It was then that I understood that I was facing something beyond normal. something that may have unintentionally invoked myself. Guilt and fear invaded me like an avalanche. That voice didn't seem to be just a vengeful human. It sounded like a force of darkness, as if linked to something much older and powerful. In the midst of panic, I felt a presence behind me. I turned and saw a silhouette, a tall man, wrapped in a dark coat that absorbed the low light. His eyes shone ominously. He sketched a cold smile as he saw me. Unbeknownst to me, he approached and whispered in my ear, "You woke up what you shouldn't. Now there is no escape." For a second, that seemed eternal. I was paralyzed. I needed to react. In a moment, I ran out, dropping the phone to the floor and echoes a hollow noise through the abandoned store. I ran away desperately in the dark streets, as I felt that at any moment that dark presence could reach me. When I finally stopped to recover my breath, I realized I was not safe. That entity, or whatever it was, would follow me beyond the shadows. In the following days, I returned to my work at the emergency center, but I was never the same again. Every touch of the phone brought me a dread of dread, fearing to be that infernal voice again. The veiled threats, the nasty details of my past, and the certainty that something fed on my fear consumed me. I dreamed awake with that abandoned store, the man with bright eyes, the phone that should not exist. The paranormal calls did not stop. The constant whisper pursued my sanity, and deep down, a part of me understood that I would never really escape. I now carry the burden of a hidden sin, a past I tried to bury, but that returns to haunt me on every night in the night. I feel that there is no redemption for what I did, and that the whispering voice found in me a perfect target, a soul that discusses guilt. So I live my days as a haunt of myself, attached to a torment cycle that repeats each new touch of the phone. And even though I try to escape a macabre destination, I suspect the price for my secrets will never be paid completely. When night falls, I always ask myself, how long will I resist before succumbing to the eternal call of darkness once and for all?